Today, let's see how each state voted relative to the rest of the country in the 1976 election. We'll see which states were more red and which were more blue. So we're not going to do a spreadsheet, but we are going to take a quick look at the background information. So this was a close one in 76. Jimmy Carter pulled it out with 297 electoral votes. He got 23 states plus D.C. He got just a majority of the popular vote at 50.1%. Gerald Ford took the loss for the Republicans. He finished with 240 electoral votes out of 27 states, and that was worth 48% of the popular vote. So for this, we're concerned about the national popular vote difference between Carter and Ford. Carter's 50.1 minus Ford's 48 comes out to an advantage of 2.1% for Carter. So any state that voted for Carter by more than 2.1 is relatively bluer. Any state that voted for Carter by less than that, or for Ford, is going to be relatively redder. And you can also see on this map, totally different than today's electoral map. But if we get back on the map, these electoral votes are what they were back in 76. So before we get started, we're also going to use some shading on this map. We've got 4 levels of it. The darkest colors are 10% or more. Then we've got 5 to 9.9, then 1 to 4.9. The lightest shade is going to be under 1%. Those are the tilt margins. So let's lay out the first state. We'll go alphabetically. It's Alabama. Here Carter won the state convincingly. He got 55.7. Ford got 42.6. The difference between Carter and Ford was a 13.1% margin for Carter. That's way above the national popular vote share for Carter of 2.1. 13.1 minus 2.1 means Alabama voted relatively more Democratic by an even 11%. So let's go through the rest of the states. Alaska, that one was way more Republican at 24.3%. In the Southwest and Arizona, that was similar at 18.7. But back into the South, where Carter had his strength, Arkansas was way up there, bluer by 27.9. On the West Coast, California was redder by 3.9. Colorado, same direction at 13.6. And Connecticut on the East Coast, that came in at 7.3. Then we've got some relatively bluer states. It's Delaware at 3.3. Florida, 3.2. Carter's home state was relatively the highest percentage out of all the states. It was bluer at 31.6. Hawaii is a blue state, but back then it voted barely to the left of the country by just 0.4%. Idaho was way toward the right at 24.9. Illinois, much milder in that direction at 4.1. Indiana, more than twice that at 9.7. Iowa, back down at 3.1. Kansas, back up there again at 9.7. Kentucky was bluer at 5.1, as was Louisiana at 3.6. Maine was relatively redder at 2.9. The first district was 3.4 and the second was 2.6. In Maryland, it was bluer by 3.9. Massachusetts, 10 more than that at 13.6. Michigan, Ford's home state, they supported him more to the right of the country by 7.5%. Minnesota was in the opposite direction by 10.8. Mississippi had the smallest relative percentage out of all the states, just 0.2% redder. Missouri, a little bit bluer at 1.5. Then we've got more red states. It's Montana, 9.5. Nebraska, 22.8. Nevada, 6.5. New Hampshire, 13.4. New Jersey, 4.3. And New Mexico, 4.6. Couple of relatively bluer states. It's New York at 2.4. North Carolina was more than that at 9%. North Dakota was a little less than that toward the Republicans at 8%. Also in that direction, it's Ohio at 1.9. Oklahoma, 3.3. And Oregon, 2.3. Then it's bluer in Pennsylvania at a mild 0.6%. Rhode Island, 9.2. And South Carolina, 11. Then we've got it redder at South Dakota, 3.6. Tennessee is bluer at 10.9. And Texas comes in bluer at an even 1%. Utah was relatively the reddest state out there at 30.8. Vermont also toward the GOP, but by a lower 13.3. Virginia, even 10% less at 3.4. In the Northwest, Washington came in at 6%. West Virginia was bluer by 14.1. Wisconsin, just a tiny bit redder at 0.4. And Wyoming was noticeably redder at 21.6. Then Washington, D.C. clocks in way bluer at 63%. So those are all the states and all the relative percentages. And if you look at the top, totaling up the electoral votes, it's close, but states that were more Democratic total 254. More Republican were 284. The Republicans do have the edge, but in the actual election, Dems came out on top. This map actually closely mirrors the election results with 3 flips. Those are Mississippi, Wisconsin, and Ohio. Carter won all 3 of those, but in this, they were more Republican. So Carter, of course, dominates in the South. That's where he was from. That part of the country was way bluer back then. If you look at the West Coast, it's redder. Ford managed to win all those states. The Northeast is a little bit more mixed, but you've also got West Virginia, way, way bluer. The Rust Belt is kind of a mix, but some of these states stand out compared to the surrounding states. You might be wondering why Hawaii was just slightly bluer. Why was Mississippi a little bit redder when everything around it was bluer? What about West Virginia or Connecticut? And how about Minnesota? The long-standing blue state did not disappoint even back in 1976. But this was a close election, both in the Electoral College and the national popular vote. It's always interesting to see how each state voted compared to the entire country. And the answer to that question is this map right here. So let me know in the comments. What do you think about any of the data on this map? Why do you think some states put up the margins that they did? Let me know what you're taking a look at down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.